The street was almost empty, a rare quiet stretch between the train station and the neon spill of the main avenue. Shop signs flickered, rainwater collected in uneven grooves on the pavement. Alex slowed his steps when he noticed her ahead, tall, graceful, the kind of presence that rearranged the air around her. She stood beneath a dim street lamp, scrolling through her phone. An elegant coat clung to her frame. The belt hung loose as if she'd stopped midway through tying it. Her hair, dark and loose, moved slightly in the damp breeze. Even from a few feet away, he caught a faint trace of perfume, something woody, expensive, the scent lingering like an unfinished sentence. He told himself to keep walking. Instead, he adjusted his messenger bag and approached. "Excuse me," he said, aiming for casual. "Are you looking for somewhere? This part of the street can be a maze." She looked up. Her eyes were quick, assessing. "Actually," she said, voice low but even, "I was trying to remember which way to turn for Crescent." "That's 2 blocks over," he said. "Past the bookshop with the green awning." A small smile. "You sound like you live here. Work nearby." He gestured vaguely at the cluster of office buildings behind them. "You?" "Occasionally," she said. The corner of her mouth curved as though she was amused by her own evasiveness. For a beat, neither moved. A car passed, its tires hissing on wet asphalt. He noticed how she held her phone slightly away from her body, like a shield. "I can walk you there if you'd like," he heard himself say. "It's on my way." She tilted her head. "Is it?" "Sort of." He swallowed, realizing how transparent he sounded. "I mean, not exactly." She studied him, then laughed quietly, the sound more breath than voice. "You're honest, at least." They started walking side by side. Their footsteps echoed unevenly, hers confident, his uncertain. He asked a few neutral questions: weather, traffic, the best coffee around here. She answered politely but sparingly. The silence that followed felt less like an absence than a shared pause. When they reached a narrow alley leading to Crescent, she slowed. "This is me," she said. He stopped too. "Then my tour guide duties end here." Her gaze flicked up at him, sharper now. "Stop looking at me like that." Heat rose to his face. "Like what?" "Like you're trying to memorize me." He let out a small, nervous laugh. "Then stop being so hard to forget." She blinked, startled. For a fraction of a second the mask slipped. Something flickered across her face. Surprise, maybe, or recognition. She glanced down at her phone again, but didn't type. A delivery scooter zipped by, splashing a thin spray of water across the curb. She stepped back quickly and her hand brushed his. The contact was fleeting but electric, enough to make his pulse stumble. Neither of them acknowledged it. She straightened her coat, recovering her composure. "Good night," she said, more firmly this time, and turned toward the boutique entrance tucked just off Crescent. Its door opened with a muted chime. Warm light spilled over her as she disappeared inside. Alex stayed where he was, heart hammering, staring at the reflection of her coat in the glass until it vanished. Rain started again, soft and persistent, but he didn't move. He wondered if she'd look for him when she came back out, or if he'd already crossed a line without meaning to. Elena's apartment looked exactly like she did, stylish without trying too hard. Pale walls, tall windows, books stacked in uneven towers, a faint trace of sandalwood from a candle flickering on the console. Outside the city hummed. Here it was warm and still. Alex balanced a folder on his knee, sorting loose contracts she'd asked him to help organize. She perched cross-legged on the rug, hair pinned up loosely, reading glasses slipping down her nose. Without the coat and heels, she looked softer but somehow even more unreachable. "Color-coding them was smart," he said, lining. "Papers in neat piles." She laughed quietly. "I stole that trick from my assistant. I'm only organized when someone's watching." "Lucky for you," he said before he could stop himself. "I'm a good audience." Her eyes flicked up at him, sharp, then almost shy. "Careful," she murmured. "You sound like you're taking notes." "I notice things," he said. "Occupational hazard." "Notice what?" she asked, but the way she asked it, half teasing, half serious, made him hesitate. He shrugged, focusing on the papers. "Micro stuff. Expressions. Tone. Hesitation." "That's dangerous," she said softly. She reached for another folder, her hand brushing his. Not the clumsy contact of strangers this time. Something slower, unconscious. Her thumb grazed the back of his knuckles before retreating. He held perfectly still. The candle flickered, Rain tapped against the glass like fingertips. He felt the weight of every inch between them and the strange pull to close it. "You okay?" she asked, voice light but eyes searching. "Yeah," he said quickly, too quickly. She gave a small smile and looked back down at the papers, but he saw her swallow hard. For a moment neither spoke. He catalogued every detail, the way her shoulders tensed, how her laughter had thinned, how she smoothed her skirt when she wasn't nervous but guilty. He wondered if she felt the same flicker he did, the wrong and right thrill that left him off balance. He wondered if staying was a mistake or if leaving would be worse. He stacked the last folder and cleared his throat. "All done." She blinked as if waking. "Already?" "Yeah." He reached for his bag. She hesitated, fingers resting on the edge of a contract. "You don't have to go yet." He froze. Her voice dropped, almost a whisper now. "Stay a little longer." Outside, a car horn sounded, distant and muted. Inside the room, everything else fell away. The candle's soft crackle, the smell of paper, and her perfume. She didn't look at him when she said it. And he didn't move, caught between every reason to leave and every reason to stay. Rain pattered against the tall apartment windows, a steady percussion that made the space feel smaller, closer. The city outside was a blur of gray and neon. Inside, the dim lamplight softened everything into amber. Alex balanced a paper bag and 2 cups as he nudged the door closed with his foot. "I figured you'd still be working," he said, holding up the coffee. "Hazelnut, no sugar." "Right." Elena glanced over her shoulder from where she stood by the window. She was straightening a curtain with one hand, her hair falling forward in a loose sweep. "You remembered," she said. Her tone was light, but her eyes lingered on him a beat too long. He crossed the room, setting the bag on the low table. "Rain's brutal out there. I can hear it." She tugged the curtain again. It didn't need fixing, but she kept smoothing it, as if the motion gave her something to do with her hands. He stepped closer, reached out to adjust the other side. Their fingers met at the fabric, brushed, then hesitated. Neither pulled back immediately. The curtain swayed slightly from their combined movement. It was nothing, barely a touch, but Alex felt the spark travel up his arm. Elena's lips parted, the faintest intake of breath. "Sorry," he said softly, though he wasn't sure what he was apologizing for. "Don't be," she murmured, eyes still on the curtain but not seeing it. The phone on the console buzzed, sharp against the soft sound of rain. Elena jerked back, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Work," she said quickly, crossing to it. She glanced at the screen, then flipped it face down without answering. Alex picked up the coffee cups, holding one out to her. "Everything okay?" "Yes." She accepted the cup, fingers brushing his again. This time brief, deliberate, but quickly withdrawn. "Thank you." He watched her sip, her profile turned toward the window again. The candle from last night had burned down to a stub. Sandalwood still hung in the air, mingling with the smell of coffee. He wondered what it meant that she didn't take the call, or why she seemed relieved and disappointed at once. He cleared his throat. "I should probably." "You don't have to explain," she interrupted, a small smile flickering across her face. "You're kind to bring coffee." He shifted his weight, bag strap sliding off his shoulder. She stood there, cup in hand, waiting for him to move or not move. The rain grew louder. He drifted toward the door, heart thudding, but his hand hovered near the knob without touching it. Through the glass, he could see his reflection, pale and uncertain. He told himself to leave, but his feet stayed planted, caught between the pulse of the room and the storm outside. The apartment was mostly dark except for one lamp on the far side of the room. Its shade threw a muted circle of amber light across the couch where Elena sat, knees drawn up beneath a loose cashmere sweater. Outside the windows, the storm had dulled to a steady hiss, like someone breathing in the distance. Alex sat opposite her on the arm of a chair, cradling a mug that had gone lukewarm. He was supposed to leave an hour ago. Instead, he listened to the rain and her voice, low and hesitant. "I hate empty apartments at night," she said suddenly. "It's like the walls get bigger, or maybe I get smaller. I don't know which." He glanced at her. In the dim light, her face was softer, the lines around her mouth more fragile. "You live in the middle of the city," he said gently. "Doesn't it ever feel crowded?" "That's the trick." She let out a thin laugh. "Crowded streets. Empty rooms. You can disappear either way." He shifted, setting his mug down. You don't seem like someone who disappears. Her eyes flicked up, catching his. Maybe I'm just good at it. She drew her sweater tighter, then exhaled slowly. Everyone thinks I'm so. She broke off, searching. So composed. Like I don't have cracks. I don't, he said before thinking. I don't think that. Silence fell. The rain ticked softly. She looked at him a long time, as though weighing whether to go further. I was married once, she said quietly. Years ago. It ended badly. Some nights I still wait for the door to open, even though I know no one's coming. He felt something tighten in his chest. The words rose before he could stop them. I want to be the one who knocks on that door. I think about you too much. But he bit them back. He wasn't sure if he was protecting her or himself. Instead, he said, that sounds lonely. It is. She gave a brittle smile. But loneliness feels safer than hope. He wanted to reach for her hand. His fingers twitched against his knee, but stayed put. She shifted slightly, the hem of her sweater brushing his leg as she leaned to set her glass on the table. The warmth of her shoulder lingered, a quiet current between them. Their eyes met again. The lamp hummed faintly. The room held its breath. His mouth opened, a confession hovering, but no sound came. She tilted her head, as if she'd heard the unspoken words anyway. Neither moved. The silence grew dense, charged, like static before a storm. You could have sliced it with a knife and still not found the bottom of what it held. The storm had passed overnight, but the apartment still smelled of wet streets and sandalwood. Morning light seeped through the curtains, muted and pale. Alex was stacking loose magazines on the sideboard when something slipped free from between them, a worn photograph, edges curled. It showed Elena 20 years younger, hair longer, eyes bright but unsmiling. She stood in front of a fountain, one hand lifted as if waving at the person behind the camera. The paper felt delicate in his fingers, almost soft from handling. He hadn't meant to look long, but he did. Behind him her voice came, low but sharp. Where did you find that? He turned. She stood in the doorway, barefoot, coffee cup trembling slightly in her hand. The tension in her gaze was immediate, like a shutter closing. It just slipped out of the magazines, he said, holding it out. I'm sorry. She crossed the room, took the photo, but didn't put it away. Instead, she stared at it, thumb stroking the crease in the corner. I should have thrown this out a long time ago, she murmured. Alex hesitated. You look happy, he said carefully. I wasn't, she replied. Eyes still on the image. I thought I was. That was before everything came apart. He waited. She lowered herself onto the arm of the couch, shoulders hunched as if bracing for a blow. I was engaged. He left. No explanations worth anything. I built everything after that from scratch. My career, my apartment, the person people think I am. She gave a dry laugh. And still I keep the picture, like a warning. He sat across from her, hands clasped. I didn't know. Of course you didn't. I don't tell anyone. She set the photo down on the coffee table, but didn't release it entirely. It's easier to let people think I'm untouchable. Safer. Alex leaned forward, words rising before he could stop them. I don't want to lose what's here. It came out as a whisper, almost a plea. Her head lifted. For the first time she met his eyes without any armor, and he saw the flicker of something raw. Fear, desire, maybe both. You don't know what here even is, she said softly. But her hand didn't move away from his when it brushed the edge of the coffee table. He swallowed. Then tell me. She opened her mouth, closed it again. The photo lay between them, a small rectangle of the past anchoring the space. Neither of them reached for it now. The room seemed to contract, holding them in a fragile stillness. Morning light glinted off the photo's surface, catching their reflections. Two figures leaning toward each other but not yet touching, suspended between confession and retreat. The balcony jutted out over a scatter of neon and moving headlights. Far below, horns and laughter rose up in thin threads. But up here the night felt carved out, cool and private. A soft breeze lifted Elena's hair off her shoulders as she leaned on the rail, wine glass balanced between her hands. Behind her, the apartment glowed like a stage left empty. Alex stepped out carrying nothing but the weight in his chest. The sliding door whispered shut. He could smell the faint trace of her perfume mixing with the sharp scent of the city after rain. You always escape out here, he said quietly. It's the only place I can breathe, she replied without turning. Her tone was calm, but her fingers tightened on the stem of the glass. He came to stand beside her, leaving a respectful gap. The rail was cool under his palms. "It's beautiful," he said, meaning the city but not looking at it. She gave a small smile, eyes still on the horizon. "You're too young to sound nostalgic." "I'm not nostalgic." He hesitated, then let the words out anyway. "I just can't stop thinking about you." The hum of the street below went muffled, as if the night itself had inhaled. Elena's breath caught audibly. She turned her head just enough for him to see her profile, the sweep of her lashes lowered. For a heartbeat, she looked like she might retreat, slip back into the apartment, and shut the door between them. Instead, she whispered, "You shouldn't say that." "I know." He stared at the railing. "I tried not to." The breeze moved again, carrying the faint clink of her bracelet against the glass. "Alex." He finally looked at her. "I don't want to pretend anymore," he said, voice unsteady. "Every time I walk away, it feels like leaving something unfinished." Her lips parted, but no words came. The city lights flickered across her face, gold, blue, gold again, like she was standing under a rotating signal. She lifted a hand, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek, but the gesture trembled. "You think this is simple," she said softly. "It isn't." "I don't think it's simple," he replied. "I just think it's real." For a long moment, neither moved. The cool wind touched the space between them, the smell of rain and iron and her perfume tangled together. He could see her pulse at the base of her throat, quick and fragile. Elena shifted closer to the railing, then a fraction toward him. Her glass hung forgotten at her side. In her eyes was the same war he felt in his chest, want and restraint, fear and a hunger for something she'd locked away. She leaned in slightly, not enough to close the distance, but enough to erase the air between their shoulders. The city roared faintly below, but up here everything went silent, suspended. Morning light pooled across the apartment like spilled cream, softening every edge into pastel. The storm had left the windows streaked, but the city beyond was bright, almost too bright after the night. Elena sat at the kitchen table, hair damp from a shower, a white mug cupped in both hands. She looked like someone waking from a dream she wasn't sure she'd had. Alex stood by the counter, pouring water into the French press. Neither of them spoke at first. The clatter of the spoon and the low murmur of the kettle were the only sounds. "You didn't sleep," she said finally, not a question. "Not much," he admitted. She traced a finger along the rim of her mug, then looked up at him. In daylight, his face seemed younger, more uncertain. In daylight, she could feel the weight of her own years like an invisible coat. But neither of them looked away. "I don't know what happens now," he said quietly. "Neither do I." She managed a small smile, one corner of her mouth lifting. "That's the honest part." He sat across from her. The space between them felt changed, less electric, more fragile. "Last night," he hesitated. "I didn't mean to complicate things." "You didn't," she said, though her voice had a crack in it. "They were already complicated." A pause. She turned her mug in slow circles. "Some lines aren't meant to be crossed," she said at last, as if trying the words on. Then, softer, "But sometimes they already are." He looked at her hands, pale against the dark ceramic. "I don't regret it," he whispered. Her eyes flickered, then softened. "I don't know what I feel yet," she said. "But I can't pretend nothing's shifted." Sunlight caught the small lines near her eyes, the faint tremor of his fingers on the tabletop. They sat in the warmth of it, neither reaching out, neither pulling back. No promises, no script, just a quiet acknowledgement of change. After a moment, Elena exhaled and stood, setting her mug down. She moved toward the window, drawing the curtain aside. "The city looks different today," she murmured. Alex followed her gaze. "Or maybe we do." She gave a low laugh, not unkind, and turned slightly toward him. "Maybe." The curtain swayed in the breeze from the cracked window, brushing against his arm. He didn't move. She didn't, either. They stood like that, close but not touching, two silhouettes caught between night and day. Somewhere below, a car horn sounded, ordinary and distant. The moment broke, but not completely. Would you have walked away or stayed? Final takeaway. Love and connection are not perfect or immediate. They require risk, honesty, and the courage to step beyond fear. Even fleeting brushes, whispered words, and fragile moments can leave an indelible mark. Did you enjoy this story? What kinds of emotionally charged, slow-burn stories would you like to hear next?